Lightning ripped across the music sky in the 1960s, and two names blazed brightest. Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison lived fast, sang louder, and seemed doomed to crash before 30. On stage they ruled, off stage they spiraled. That hidden spiral began the very first night they met, and the fallout still chills rock historians. Janis was fearless, raw, and proud of every rough edge. Jim was magnetic yet reckless, a poet who loved to provoke. Their first backstage encounter was no playful spark. It was a wildfire of insults, shattered bottles, and a shove that almost drew blood. Witnesses froze while two supernovas collided in chaos. Stories about that fight were buried under decades of cigarette smoke and guitar feedback. Whispers spoke of bruises and broken hearts, then dismissed it all as normal rock drama. New testimony now claims Morrison crossed a terrible line that evening, and Joplin never forgot it. The secret is darker than any song lyric. To grasp Janis, we must journey to Port Arthur, Texas, a refinery town wrapped in old rules that smelled of oil and judgment. Conformity was king, and any girl who dared to paint outside the lines paid in loneliness. Janis refused to shrink. She wanted blues, not pop, paint splashes, not prom dresses, and truth, not polite smiles. She blasted Bessie Smith and lead belly from a cheap radio, while classmates chuckled behind cupped hands. Acne dotted her face, weight swung up and down, and tomboy shirts hung loose. Kids pointed and laughed every single day. Overnight, she became a target. The more they pushed her down, the louder she sang. Her first hope of escape arrived with college acceptance letters. Reality slapped harder than a guitar riff. At the University of Texas, she trudged barefoot to coffee houses, auto harp in hand, only to face new cruelty. A fraternity ballot crowned her ugliest man on campus, and the headline burned like acid. Each jeer forged another layer of armor around her heart. Pain turned into fire whenever she opened her mouth to sing. That voice cracked, wailed, and bled truth. Listeners felt every bruise she ever hid. She did not study the blues. She became them. Every house shouted, "I am here, and you cannot silence me." Audiences sobbed and cheered as if liberated by her defiance. Yet every triumph carried echoing hurt. The bitterness followed her onto dusty stages and dim motel rooms. She needed something to quiet the ache, and what she chose would wrap around her future like barbed wire. The next part of her story reveals the sweet burn she clutched like a lifeline, and how that burn helped kill her. Every lonely night she scribbled poems in tattered notebooks, dreaming of cities where freaks became heroes. She promised herself that someday the same mouth that mocked her would beg for tickets. The vow kept her alive through gray mornings and empty pocket dinners. A storm was gathering behind those clear blue glasses, and it demanded a stage. Enter the bottle that glittered like liquid gold every time stage lights hit the glass. Southern Comfort was more than a drink for Janis. It was a sidekick that swaggered right beside her on every tour. She raised it high like a flag of rebellion, and the crowd roared as if watching royalty sip power. She did not nurse tiny gulps. She gulped deep and fearless. Between verses, she tilted the bottle, letting whiskey-colored fire slide down her throat while her voice soared over guitars. Friends worried, yet fans copied her daring stance. One swig promised courage. A second stole caution. A third blurred the edge that separated frenzy from tragedy. Most people swore Southern Comfort was pure bourbon, yet the label hit a twist. It was actually a sweet spirit built on neutral grain alcohol, closer to vodka than to any smooth Kentucky mash. That odd identity matched Janis perfectly, because she never fitted tidy categories either. Together Woman and Bottle shattered expectations and sold out arenas. Photographers snapped endless images of her with Soko tucked beneath one arm like a talisman. Journalists wrote that the brand should send royalty checks, but Janis never received a dime. Instead, the company mailed her a lavish lynx fur coat and hat, a flashy thank you that she wore with cheeky delight. She joked that the coat felt warmer than applause. The warmth, though, came with a chilling price. Alcohol soothed stage nerves, then grew bolder, demanding dominance even when the lights went dark. Nights blurred into dawn, highways into hotel hallways, friendships into quarrels. Under neon club signs, she sought not just applause but love, a deep, steady love that could match her hurricane heart. She dated poets, painters, and drifters, Yet each affair cracked like cheap vinyl. Many desire the legend. Few embrace a fragile woman who whispered fears into midnight phones. In 1968, she crossed paths with Leonard Cohen, already a myth in black suit and bittersweet baritone. They shared a brief night that Cohen later immortalized in Chelsea Hotel No. 2, and the memory haunted Janis far longer than the song hinted. Cohen coolly described her as a searching spirit who settled for momentary comfort, a line that cut deep when she heard it. To him, it was poetry. To her, it was another reminder that she seldom found real tenderness. She had actually roamed the hall hoping to find Chris Christopherson. Yet fate offered a different songwriter and a lonely morning after. Night after night, the cycle repeated. She leaped into crowds that adored her howl, then slipped backstage into arms that rarely stayed till sunrise. Each dashed romance carved a new groove in the vinyl of her heart. Friends say every note of Piece of My Heart bled with those private wounds, and that listeners could feel the hurt even if they never knew the story. Every triumph carried hidden weight. Woodstock thundered, yet she stumbled off stage gasping from drink and exhaustion. Chart numbers climbed, yet her hands shook while signing posters. Newspapers called her Queen of Rock Blues, but she looked in the mirror and saw the kid labeled Ugliest Man all those years before. The past would not loosen its grip, and Southern comfort kept the ghosts close. What came next was a final spiral that left the hotel room silent and the world in mourning. Before we reached that heartbreaking end, remember the girl from Port Arthur who dared to love blues records, who refused a bout of rotten laughter, and who taught millions to scream truth at the night sky. Her flame burns short, yet its heat still rages. A broken heart can echo louder than any guitar riff. Janis Joplin learned that truth the hard way, and every crack in her soul bled straight into her music. Leonard Cohen later admitted he named her in a song without grasping how deeply it might cut. For him, it was art. For her, it was one more bruise that never quite faded. Those bruises became fuel. Piece of My Heart, Cry Baby. And maybe were not polished pop numbers. They were open letters that screamed, I hurt and I still hope. Each chorus ripped open a private wound. Yet listeners felt healed because someone finally spoke their pain out loud. Fame did not mend those wounds. It magnified them. Long before the spotlight, Janis leaned on alcohol and little white pills to numb the ache. Once she hit national stages, heroin slipped in like a thief and refused to leave. Applause thundered, yet loneliness roared even louder behind the curtain. Friends watched in horror as the queen of live shows turned silent in hotel rooms. Jokes died, nerves frayed, and the party that once felt thrilling started to rot from the inside. She tried to quit more than once, even hiding in Texas for a spell, but the call of music and the rush that came with it dragged her back. Tiny flashes of hope still flickered. While recording the album that would become Pearl, the people around her thought she might finally outrun her demons. They were wrong. Quietly, she slipped back to the needle, chasing calm that never lasted. On October 4th, 1970, the cycle ended in a Hollywood hotel. 2 weeks after Jimi Hendrix fell, Janis Joplin joined him. The second bright star gone at 27. The news rattled the planet and cemented a chilling pattern that rock fans would soon call the 27 Club. Janis's passing sealed her legend, but it also risked turning her life into a cliché. Jim Morrison, the so-called Lizard King, would cross her path again, and the truth behind her clash would chill even the loudest cheering crowd. A dark secret has shattered rock lore. In the 2025 docuseries Before the End, Searching for Jim Morrison, those closest to him finally speak. Judy Huddleston, one of his former girlfriends, accuses him of crossing every line. She says he once pinned her arms and forced himself on her despite her clear refusal, and that he just went psycho in a flash of rage. Her memoir Love Him Madly lays bare how he twisted charm into control. For years of emotional games left her drained, she hoped she could save him, but only felt crushed. It was never romance, but cruel abuse that haunted her every step. Pamela Desbars, another rock scene legend, recalls Morrison slapping her at Whiskey A Go Go for no reason. Drummer John Densmore tells of Morrison holding a knife to a woman and yanking her arms just to scare her. For decades, such stories were written off as wild rock excess, but now they roar with fresh horror. This new view turns every anecdote upside down. Even the famous clash with Janis Joplin was never simple frolic in a booze haze. Her own defense with a bottle of Southern Comfort was not diva drama, but desperate self-protection. Morrison's legend may still shine bright on stage, but the shadow it casts is darker and far more disturbing. The night they first met felt like a dream gone mad. Producer Paul Rothchild, hoping to ignite magic, planted Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin at a private party in Hidden Hills. Both arrived sober, a rare move, but what started as laughter and flirtation soon turned ugly. Morrison's drinking kicked in, and he morphed from magnetic poet into a snarling brute. Rothschild later called him a cretin, a disgusting drunk right before Janis's eyes. She tried to smile then edge away, but he pressed harder, treating her denial like a dare. When Janis climbed into her station wagon ready to flee, he lurched after her, grabbing a handful of her hair in a desperate lunge. That was the spark she needed. Grabbing the nearest object, Janis smashed a bottle of Southern Comfort across his head. Glass flew everywhere, and Morrison hit the ground, stunned, bleeding, and humiliated. In that moment, Janis made it clear she was no one's conquest. She drove off into the night, leaving behind a legend broken by his own fury. That one act of defense echoes through rock history as proof that even icons have a breaking point. In that moment, Janis Joplin unleashed a force nobody expected. She grabbed the nearest object, a glass bottle of Southern Comfort, that never left her hand on stage, and swung it with the power of someone who'd had enough. The bottle smashed against Jim Morrison's head in a single, unfiltered act of resistance. Morrison collapsed in a spray of glass, while onlookers stared in stunned silence. This was not a bar fight or a drunken prank on a tour bus. It was a raw statement that Janis refused to be cornered or controlled. As Jim lay dazed and bleeding, Janis climbed into her station wagon behind the wheel like a warrior claiming victory. The next day, Morrison stepped into rehearsal still asking for Janis's number, praising her as terrific, completely blind to the line he had crossed. To him, this was another rock tale to spin, but to Janis, it was Judgment Day. She made her friends promise never to forget the night that showed his true face. From that night on, her disdain for Morrison was no secret. She never spoke at length in public, but everyone close to her understood. The bottle was not just glass, it was her boundary. When Morrison dared to cross it, she ensured he would know she would never tolerate fear or intimidation. They say this was not the only time Janis defended herself physically against Morrison. At Manhattan scene, nightclub witnesses claim Morrison heckled Jimi Hendrix on stage until Janis struck again with a bottle, then drenched him with her drink. The three icons reportedly tumbled into a wild blur of feathers, broken glass, and sweat in a scene so unreal it felt pulled from a psychedelic fever dream. A life can rise from tragedy and triumph all at once. Janis Joplin's real power lay in emotional truth, not in flawless technique. Every lyric and every scream came from deep inside her soul. She didn't whisper through song, she roared them alive. In a world that told women to be small and quiet, she chose to be loud and messy. When she poured pain into Piece of My Heart, or wept through Little Girl Blue, audiences felt the ache of every outsider and every broken dream. She was a conduit for those who had never been heard. Even 50 years after her passing, Janis towers over music history. She warns us that fame can shred the strongest spirits. Yet she also shows the beauty of staying true to yourself. Her cracked notes and defiant howls left behind more than songs. They left a legacy of rebellion and raw honesty. That is why her story still hurts and still matters. Janis Joplin dared to scream truth at the night sky and made millions feel brave enough to join her. That roar still echoes,